The vanishing point. The first time I noticed the pattern was in early March 2024. I managed the database for a missing persons clearinghouse, a nonprofit that coordinates information between law enforcement agencies nationwide. What started as a statistical anomaly in our quarterly report became something I can no longer explain away with rational thought. It began with Eliza Chen, 34, last seen leaving her apartment in Seattle on February 18th. Security footage showed her walking to her car, pausing to check something on her phone, then looking up sharply as though someone had called her name. She glanced over her shoulder, then directly at the camera with an expression I've reviewed dozens of times but still cannot categorize. Not fear, not confusion, but a sort of dawning recognition. She walked deliberately out of frame, leaving her car door open, her purse on the seat. Her phone was found 2 miles away near Discovery Park. The last thing in her search history was a news article about unusual atmospheric phenomena reported over the Pacific Northwest the previous night. 3 days later, Marcus Delaney disappeared from his night shift at a research facility in Boulder, Colorado. Security footage showed him working alone at 2:17 a.m. At 2:18, he looked up suddenly, removed his glasses, and stepped out of frame. The building's exit log showed no departure. His car remained in the parking lot. The facility was locked from the inside. By the end of March, 17 similar cases appeared across 12 states. Each person vanished without struggle, often while alone. Each left behind personal effects, phones, wallets, keys, as though stepping away momentarily rather than leaving permanently. Several had searched for information about unusual lights or sounds in their areas in the days before disappearing. Law enforcement treated these as separate cases. Our database was among the few places where the pattern emerged. I began tracking commonalities beyond the obvious. Most vanished between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Most were described by friends or family as sensitive, whether emotionally perceptive or prone to migraines, vivid dreams, or synesthesia. Many had recently mentioned feeling watched or experiencing electronic disturbances, devices turning on by themselves, calls with no one there, appliances functioning without being plugged in. In April, the phenomenon accelerated, 43 cases matching the pattern. In May, 78. That's when the Bureau contacted our organization requesting all data on these cases. I complied, submitting everything except my personal notes on the pattern's subtler aspects. Within days, the cases were reclassified in our system under a new designation, status pending, federal jurisdiction. Media coverage dwindled despite the increasing numbers. Local news outlets that pursued the stories reported sources suddenly going silent or information becoming classified. In June, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Dr. Eleanor Reed introduced herself as a behavioral psychologist consulting with the government. Her credentials seemed impeccable, though I could later find no record of her professional history online. "You've noticed something in the data," she said without preamble. Not a question. I admitted I had. "There are patterns within patterns," she said, declining to sit when offered. "The public ones, timing, locations, demographics, and the private ones that exist in the negative spaces between data points." She knew things I hadn't shared with anyone. Observations about electrical anomalies reported near disappearance sites, about the peculiar calm exhibited by the missing persons in their final recorded moments, about the slight increase in ambient temperature recorded at locations where security cameras captured the vanishings. "They're not being taken," she said finally. "They're being called." She left me her card with instructions to contact her if I noticed escalation patterns. When I tried the number the next day, it was disconnected. When I searched government databases for her name, I found no record. In July, the pattern shifted. Those who vanished began leaving behind objects arranged in precise geometric patterns: coins, jewelry, watches placed in perfect circles or triangles. Some left notebooks filled with drawings of identical symbols none of their loved ones recognized. Others sent text messages in the moments before disappearing, containing strings of seemingly random numbers that, when plotted as coordinates, traced perfect logarithmic spirals across global maps. By August, I'd identified 212 cases nationwide fitting the core pattern. The Bureau stopped requesting my reports. When I inquired about the case's status, I was informed they had been transferred to an unnamed department, and my clearance was insufficient for further updates. In September, I noticed another shift. The vanishings began clustering around specific geographic locations, areas near deep water bodies, ancient cave systems, places with unusual electromagnetic readings. Surveillance footage began showing the missing individuals moving with uncanny synchronicity just before disappearing, as though choreographed. Then the dream started. I began seeing the missing in my sleep, not as I knew them from photographs, but standing together in a vast, dark space illuminated by soft, pulsing light. They appeared neither frightened nor harmed. They were watching something I couldn't see, their faces bathed in a blue-white glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Each dream ended the same way. One of them, a different person each time, would turn to look directly at me and speak a sequence of numbers. I began recording these numbers upon waking. When plotted as coordinates, they formed a pattern across the continental United States, a perfect Fibonacci spiral with its center point in the Nevada desert. In early October, I took a leave of absence and drove to these coordinates. The location was unremarkable, a stretch of empty desert 40 miles from the nearest town. I arrived at sunset and waited, not knowing what I expected to find. At 2:17 a.m., the air around me changed. The ambient temperature rose several degrees. The absolute silence of the desert was replaced by a low, oscillating hum just at the threshold of hearing. I felt a pressure in my ears and my chest, behind my eyes, not painful but insistent. My phone screen activated without being touched. It displayed a message I hadn't written. We are not what you think. We are not where you think. We exist in the spaces between what you perceive and what you cannot. For millennia, we have watched. For centuries, we have selected. For decades, we have prepared. The convergence approaches. Those who hear us are not victims. They are the first to understand what comes next. Look up. I did. What I saw in the night sky defies description with our limited vocabulary. It was not a craft, not a light, not a phenomenon I can categorize. It was an absence that was simultaneously a presence, a geometric impossibility that seemed to fold space around itself, creating a vacuum of perception that my mind struggled to process. I understood then what the missing had experienced in their final recorded moments, that look of recognition, of remembering something they'd always known but had temporarily forgotten. I felt it calling me. I understood with perfect clarity that I could step forward and join them. Instead, I took a photograph. When I checked my phone afterward, the image showed nothing but empty desert and stars. But embedded in the image's metadata were coordinates, 212 of them, matching the last known locations of every person who had vanished. I returned home and submitted my resignation from the clearinghouse. That same day, I received a plain manila envelope containing a single sheet of paper with a message. You were not selected, but you were noticed. Some are taken, some are witnesses. The difference is purpose. The convergence continues. 2024 is merely the beginning. The disappearances continue, though they no longer make headlines. Our cultural attention span is short. Mysteries without resolution become background noise. By December, the number of matching cases had reached 400. Law enforcement agencies now have standardized protocols for these events. They're classified immediately. Witnesses are debriefed under strict confidentiality agreements, and physical evidence vanishes into unnamed facilities. I've started a private database tracking subtle indicators that precede clusters of disappearances, atmospheric anomalies, localized electronic disturbances, reports of collective dreams. The pattern is accelerating and evolving. Whatever began in 2024 is not concluding but transforming. Last week, I woke to find my home's electronic devices, television, computer, phone, all activated simultaneously, displaying the same message. Witness function confirmed. Observation protocol initiated. Convergence date approaching. You will know when to look up again. I've disabled my home's cameras and covered my windows. I avoid being outside during the early morning hours. I've begun wearing an analog watch since my phone no longer displays accurate time. It's frozen at 2:17. Sometimes I think about Eliza Chen and that expression on her face in the last frame where she's visible. I understand it now. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was recognition. The look of someone who suddenly remembers a truth they've always known. They haven't disappeared. They've been reclaimed, and whatever called them is still watching the rest of us, evaluating, selecting, waiting for us to look up.